What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's LUMIX Live. Happy to be back after a little bit of a break for the Thanksgiving holiday here in the US. And what a good thing to come back to and, basically chat about the new firmware updates that we've got. I know, obviously, a lot of you have probably already seen a bunch of information, watched a bunch of videos about, what's been added in the firmware. But I wanted to use this opportunity to be able to kind of actually go a little bit more in depth with everybody, actually go through, show all the menus, answer your questions that you may have. Hi, Cam. Looks like a young hip Santa. Well, I think I gotta get a little more gray before I can get to that point yet. But I do feel like Santa sometimes, being able to be part of, giving all of this out to everybody with your cameras. That was super, super corny. Sorry, I won't do it again. Anyway, so yeah, we're gonna take the stream. I've got my S1R2 hooked up. I've got an S1II as well, so that we can walk through the different things that were all added, kind of go through, answer the questions that some of you may have, clear up some things that some may have, and maybe also give a little bit more in-depth info into some of the changes that were made, specifically around thermal updates and management changes that have happened within these cameras that, as I think many of you have seen, are producing some sizable changes in the performance with this camera. So we've got all of that hooked up, ready to go and talk about. But before I go into that, I want to remind those of you in the United States about LUMIX Pro service. We have Red and Platinum tier available in the US. The Red tier is free if you've purchased a new LUMIX camera. Follow the QR code right below me or the link down in the description. Get yourself registered. It's free. Get you that 3-year extended manufacturer warranty. You get into the program, so if you do ever have any service or support issues, you can go right to this page instead of going through general, customer support. But if you're someone who prefers higher levels of service and support, maybe a little bit more attention, faster turnaround times, you have access to the Platinum tier as well, which is a paid level service. That's going to get you access to 2-day repairs with next day shipping both ways. 20% off out of warranty repairs. So if you drop something, break something, if it's just a little bit older, but you've had it and it's out of warranty, you get a discount on the repair service for things like that. You get a welcome kit with I think it's still the strap with that. And you get access to a membership hotline. So if you prefer to speak to someone instead of going over email or chat, you do have that option available as well. So yes, I encourage you to take a look at the links below. Or the QR code if you've got a new camera, and make sure that the backside of your purchase is protected as you go through use cases. So, with that, let's quickly jump through and see any kinds of questions that came up ahead of time. There were more questions, but when I refreshed the back end here, a bunch of them cleared out. So if you did have a question to ask ahead of time and you don't see it there, just ask it again. So let's see here. There's a bunch of suggestions from LaQ Room. Let me see if I can sum these up here. Nice to have false color and various option buttons while recording in LUMIX Flow. While changing picture styles and rec quality and flow. So as far as the LUMIX Flow stuff goes, they're gonna run the same as how the camera goes. So a lot of stuff does get disabled while you're recording because they're likely changing things that are image quality dependent. So some of that stuff won't happen. But while you're on LUMIX Flow, I have to double check. But the logic being that if you are connected to LUMIX Flow and you're using LUMIX Flow as the monitor, you are saying that you want the monitor to have the control, and you can toggle false color on there. You can toggle a lot of the different tools on there. At this time, yes, LUMIX Flow does not have control over what recording modes you're in or frame rates, like that kind of stuff. The LUMIX Lab app does, but that is designed to be more of a lighter weight camera control app and editing tool, where flow is a monitoring tool, not necessarily a control tool. Doesn't mean it's always going to be like that, and we'll obviously pass that information on to the engineering team and the software team. Maybe that's stuff that could be done in future updates with the app as it evolves. But as of right now, yeah, no, there is nothing for that particular thing. As far as the comments that you're seeing about crashes or things like that, I'm running an iPhone 15 Pro Max and a Z Fold 7, and I've tested this on a was it a Pixel 9, and I've tested this on an iPad Pro and even a Samsung tablet, and I don't have crashing on it. So one of the things that I would recommend, if you ever do run into stuff like that with crashing, uninstall the app, reinstall it, check your permissions, make sure that the app isn't being, not given certain permissions that it needs, because that can cause app crashes. Check clearing the cache in the app on the mobile device. All of those things can cause crashes. But unless we have very specifics of, what phone you're using, what OS versions you're using, even stuff as simple as like, what's the age of the phone, how do you normally use the phone, stuff like that, it's hard to be able to kind of identify what could be causing a crash when I don't have, like, crash reports are very, very low on that app itself. So, yeah. How fast is focus bracketing with the S1II using flash? I have not tested. It is one of those things that I would have to go through and test. I don't have the setup here to do it. I can take a look and see if I can get some info for next week's stream for you. Try to ask this question often. Will there be an app for multi-camera work? Not that I'm aware of at this time. We do hear the request for it, but I don't believe at this particular time there's anything I've seen as far as a plan for it. After all the releases in 2025, is already thinking about the victory lap, running to the finish line with a massive lead over the competition. S1II guaranteed gold medalist. I appreciate the enthusiasm. Firmware update to be able to use subject detection for 48 frames per second and higher while using a monitor. Dirty Dollars Racing. What camera are you referring to? The S1R2, S1II, and S1IIe. Although I have to double check the S1IIe. They all have subject detection over 48 frames per second. They go all the way up to 60. And in the new firmware, you can do 4K 120 as well. About thermal management. What's actually happening inside of our cameras with the new firmware, technically speaking? Okay. This is a good segue into the update. So, as mentioned, we did release the firmware update last week. And for those that haven't done it yet, there is a supplemental update as well that came out on the 28th. There were intermittent reports of some users saying that MP4 Lite wasn't working. When they would go to access it, you'd get an error and there'd be like a weird bug. There was a quick update. It's version 1.3 that was published. You can download that, load it on, and that corrects that problem. But aside from that, clearly, MP4 Lite being added into the S1II series is one of the bigger changes to the system. So now you've got the 3.8K, 29.97, so 30 frames per second, or 25 frames per second if you're in PAL. And you've got up to 50 megabit, or it's at a 50 megabit per second. If you have your camera in PAL, you're only going to see 25. If you have your camera in NTSC, you're only going to see 30. So if you do want to change between those, you do have to just change your camera into the correct frequency range for it. This is the same deployment that we've got in the S9 and the S5 Mark IIs. So you've got a much lighter weight open gate option in that 4K range. If you prefer to use the aspect ratios to your benefits, being able to either shoot for multi-deliverable, if you're shooting anamorphic and you just want a lighter weight overall image across the board, you've got it. or even if you're someone that just, you prefer doing social media work and you just need lighter weight to transfer to your phone, cool. You've got the 3.8K MP4 light or open gate light in the S1II series cameras now as well. There were some comments, obviously, a little bit earlier about LUMIX Flow. With this update, we did update LUMIX Flow as well, so make sure that your LUMIX Flow app is fully updated. So it's at version 1.4. This brings all of the updates that we did on the S5 Mark II series, so the ability to monitor a LUT with the app, so you're not having to look at log footage. This works for ARRILOG C3 if you have that unlocked. This also works for Vlog, obviously. This system does rely on what LUT you set in the camera, so in a minute I'll show you what you want to make sure you've got set on the camera so that your use in the app is correctly representing what LUT you want it to show. Multi-frame markers are able to be displayed in the LUMIX Flow app now as well. Again, these are dependent on what the camera is. Again, thinking how the app is designed, it's designed as a monitoring tool, and you have the multi-off-camera monitor availability as well. So the primary control is going to be on the camera of what you want the monitors to be seeing. So making sense there. You've got multi-frame markers available. You set them on the camera, and then the app just parrots them into the app itself. And then there's been also some corrections and changes to the way that the AF frames work. This means, like, if I'm using One Area Plus, when I tap, it's going to move correctly. If I'm using Zone, it's going to move correctly. Minor little change, but a correction from the previous gen firmware with it. Before I go too further into that, I am going to get to the thermal details in a minute. I just want to make sure I'm not missing any other major questions before we go into that one, because I'm sure that's going to be a lot of questions. So there was that. New intro. Yeah, I wanted to change some stuff up, so I'm trying a couple different things and like a new frame and all that stuff. We'll see if it sticks. I don't know. Do you think we might see autofocus support for slow shutter configuration in the future? Probably not, because slower shutter speed, you run into autofocus problems. When you start dragging the shutter in continuous focus because the system's running at a certain frequency and then you drop below that frame rate, you're taking a single frame and now you're stretching it across 2 or 3 or 4 or however slow you're going. Autofocus just doesn't work well that way. You introduce a whole bunch of weird things, which is why if you do want to go down below, you have to be in shutter speed, and then you have to drop. You can drop down to a certain point to be able to go below what the frame rate is. I understand why some people would want it to have autofocus, but from a technical perspective, there are limitations as to how modern autofocus systems work, since they rely on the live view information being fed to the processor from the sensor. So I don't think you're going to see any kind of change in that category. Okay. Thanks for not hitting us with the cripple hammer. Hey. We like listening to what you guys all ask for and say. If we can deploy it, we'll deploy it. After resetting all camera settings and following a firmware update, will restoring the camera settings save reinstall all camera settings such as custom buttons, Q menu settings, mode C1, C2, etc.? Yeah, Ruckus. So when you do a camera saved file, so going into the menu, going down into the options here, and then actually going into... Oh, I forgot. I'm using Streamlabs this time. I forgot that there is a chat module plugged in on this one, so now chat pops up. Sorry. Yeah, so going in here and, if I remember right, yeah, save, restore camera settings. This basically takes a snapshot of the camera of your settings so that you can reinstall it. It even takes snapshots of, these are the LUTs that you had loaded, this is where they were, this is how you had all that kind of stuff applied. So that's why it's very it's highly recommended that, you know, one, anytime you do a firmware update, and I believe this is true for all cameras and all hardware and software and everything, anytime you do a firmware update or anything that's going to be changing or adding, you know, capabilities or making things more efficient, it is good practice to just basically reset your camera, because you never know if there's like, hey, over time things can stack up as you start to change, because maybe certain pieces of code don't get implemented fully because of a configuration you have on your camera. But when you have the ability that I can save my camera settings out, and then run the firmware update, do the full factory reset on the camera, then load my settings back on, it applies all of that stuff based on whatever the new underlying code is. So it is a good practice to do that, knowing that, yes, all of your settings, your custom buttons, Q menu setup, all your C1 through whatever you've got set up, all your LUTs, everything does save and get copied over. And if you're on the S1II series, so a 2, S1R2, or an S1IIe, you can save across those cameras, those 3 specific cameras. So, like for instance, when I did all of my firmware updates on the E, the R, and the 2, I have my R is the one that I always kind of have as my primary main setup camera, since that's the one that I use like 99% of the time. I have all of my stuff set up on that camera. I then just take that saved setting and put it on my other 2 cameras. The things that can be copied over get copied over. The things that aren't, you know, compatible between the 2, so obviously resolutions and some frame rate options, they're not. It just makes things a lot easier. And then I'll also just save a cam save setting file on my computer somewhere, just so like, hey, if I happen to forget that I formatted the card and I lost that file, or, you know, for whatever reason I want to reload it, I've got it saved somewhere locally on my computer, and I'm safe on that side. Let's see here. When is SmallRig A2 coming to the S5II? It's literally all I need. You got to go for an S1II series for that. I do not believe A2 is ever coming to the S5II series. We've never said it was. We've never promised it. Some things are restricted to the newer hardware and the newer products. Why live composite is not in the S9? Live view composite in the camera requires a mechanical shutter. It requires the ability to have a mechanical shutter and different readouts, bit depths and stuff like that. So the S9 doesn't have any of it, so it's not compatible with it. All right, let's talk about the thermal updates that's happened here. So, with the recent update, we did add a line in here, and I'll read it verbatim on the update site. It says, improved thermal control algorithms for longer record time. The thermal control algorithm has been improved to make it less affected by environmental factors. Under certain conditions where the ambient temperature around the camera changes rapidly, for example, when moving from indoors to outdoors, or when the camera is exposed to direct sunlight, causing the body temperature to rise rapidly, the video recording times could have become shorter. So what does all that mean? That's a big word salad, right? So when we launched the firmware, and we've talked about this before, I talked about this on Brandon Talbot's live stream the day we did the announcement. I've talked about this on other platforms as well. Testing is always done for thermals in as controlled environments as you can, because they have to be repeatable. You have to be able to say, hey, under these conditions, and this is true for everybody. If you look at footnotes for every camera that comes out, they all have a footnote about test environments that their cameras are run in, where they get their figures and their numbers, because you have to have some sort of baseline. They're tested in about as average of a scenario as you can come up with, because you start to realize that those that are going to be recording in ultra cold temperatures and those that are recording in ultra hot temperatures don't make up the mass majority of people using the products. Now, that's not saying that we're not paying attention to any of those users. We pay very close attention to them. That's why we rate our cameras. We've been rating our cameras to 104C or 104 Fahrenheit well before anybody else decided to change their testing metrics, and we see the results of some of those things. So as we've, gone through the testing there, under the same conditions, the same testing that we ran for the S5IIs, for the GH7, for the GH5s, like all of the cameras, we published at day one, these were the expected times and figures that you were going to get under these test environments. We have updated our website. We make that stuff publicly available. But what happens is as we start to use the products, as the seasons change, because you can't necessarily test all year round before a product comes out. Usually testing cycles are not, practical side testing is not an entire year long run. I'd be honest, if any company did that, I think y'all would go crazy because your release times would be even longer for products to come out. You'd all of a sudden go from getting a couple, in a year to now you're getting maybe one a year kind of thing. So as more testing came out, as we worked with a number of different users and photographers and videographers, as we used the cameras ourselves, as I used the cameras, I had been out in Las Vegas in the middle of September. It was like 105 degrees Fahrenheit out every day, shooting in direct sunlight. All of this information started working, and we were able to get this with the engineering team, and that's when we were looking and saying, like, hey, we know that there's something happening here. We need to dig through all of the code and see what is different. So to start with, the S1II and the S1R2 are using completely new sensors, especially in these style chassis. The S1 Mark IIe is using a very similar sensor to what's in the S5 Mark II and the S5 Mark IIX and the S9, so we have a pretty well understanding of how that sensor performs, what its thermal management capabilities are, how much power and heat does it generate. But then you go to S1 Mark II and S1R Mark II, and you realize that, one, we're processing a heck of a lot more information. We're originating footage from way higher quality than typically you see. And we're outputting a much higher end result quality. So as users are giving us all that feedback, the different use cases, how it works, that allowed us to go through and realize that, we needed to make some changes to how the camera's measuring ambient temperature, how it's measuring the differentials from the outside, so your proper ambient temperature, and the camera temperature itself. All these different factors are what trigger the camera to go into a protection mode. Same thing that our computers do. So up to a certain degree, it would say, yes, we're comfortable, we can be at this temperature. And even after the update and at the 104 degrees Fahrenheit, people, I think, should try to understand that hardware components like capacitors and like resistors and circuit boards and all that stuff, and the processors themselves are designed to run a lot hotter than what we're used to. Just look at a CPU on a computer. Like the CPU on my computer is running at 53 Celsius right now, and that's under a liquid cooler, and that's a normal everyday operating temperature. Anyway, all of that allowed us to go back in, review how we were measuring thermal headroom, how we were measuring what the impacts of an external force on temperature rise, adjust what happens in certain modes, like C4K 120 can generate a lot of heat very quickly from a cold start. And by cold start, we mean you take the camera, it's been powered off, you put a battery in, you turn it on, you start recording. That's a cold start. From that particular point, C4K 120 generates a really rapid increase in temperature, and it's the same in the S1R Mark II. Higher frame rates or the more demanding modes, like C4K 60 or 4K 60, demand a lot of performance, and if your ambient calculations are not 100% what they should be based on different environments, so say I start the camera indoors, then I walk outside and it's 85 degrees Fahrenheit, that is a massive delta from what the camera was started at to what the environment that the camera's actually in. So we worked on it, we found a bunch of changes we were able to make, and those changes, as you can see from a lot of people, are proving to be very, very impressive changes, or big improvements in what you can actually expect in the real world using these cameras. And as we said in the press release with it, it's because users helped us find different ways that y'all use the products, ways that are not a kind of lab testable or a repeatable environment. There's a reason why companies don't test for infrared or UV heat. It's not something that you can easily reproduce. But by working with users, especially now that, this wasn't really a concern ahead of time in previous gen cameras. Most cameras on the market don't push as hard as the S1II or the S1R2 does from a sensor, processor, and just image quality perspective. There's a reason why the S1II is like top of the charts for dynamic range and latitude in its category. Those things have some other trade-offs, and real-world use cases, it gave our engineers a really clear idea of, hey, this is how users these are the environments that a lot of users are now starting to experience more. And unfortunately, sometimes test methodology ahead of time doesn't always account for everything. You can only ever account for what you know and what you've had experience with. And now that we know, and now that we've built and changed and adjusted what it is that our cameras are set for, we're seeing big, solid improvements. So who was it that asked that question? That was... I want to make sure I call this person out, because it was a good point, and there's a reason why I wanted to kind of make sure I didn't just kind of gloss over that question. Who was it that asked it? Where is it in my chat? S1II Studios. So thank you for that question. It was really solid to put in there. And yeah, lots of improvements, and hopefully you all have had experiences with it. But also at the same time, make sure that if you've already updated your cameras, go back, double check, make sure you're on the actual most up-to-date one. Okay, so we did that one, we did that question. What about MP4 Lite Open Gate in 1080p and 2K? Maybe 2K 120 for the S1IIe. MP4 Lite is a very specific codec for the 3.8K. You have to remember, in some respects, so MP4 Lite is downsampling to get the resolution. It's not like a pixel to pixel. It's not that kind of thing. You have the option to go into pixel to pixel or Super 35 if you want, those kinds of things. So there's a lot of processing already. The lower resolution you go, the more processing you typically have to do from the higher resolution original. So like in the S1R2, the fact that it's an 8K, 8.1K sensor, going down to 3.8K is a pretty big jump. Going down to 1080 or 2K would be an even bigger jump. You also start to run into 1080 and 2K. You start running into facts that they're very tiny in resolution at that point. What is the purpose? When 3.8K is already a 50 megabit file, it's incredibly widely editable. It's even editable on mobile devices. So at that point, times have moved on. You've got 3.8K. If you need an output in 1080 or 2K, downsample it on your side. And then when it comes to the S1IIe, you run into other things that frame rates are not necessarily limited by resolution, in the sense that, 4K, 3K, 2K, 1K, like all that stuff. Frame rates are more limited by what your vertical resolution is. So if your vertical resolution in the full sensor area in Open Gate or in 16:9 can't do a certain frame rate at a resolution, it's not going to be able to do that unless you do things like windowed, which is you crop the sensors all the way in, or you get into some really, really obscure aspect ratios like you see on like phantom cameras, like ultra high speed cameras, where some of those cameras can only record like, 160 pixels tall at the width to get those ridiculous frame rates. Some have to go monochrome to do it. So it's usually not that simple for it. Neon Shores, would be cool to see Lumix Flow get anamorphic desqueeze support. That way we could even desqueeze in photo mode. I've asked about it. I know that we've had some people asking about desqueeze in Lumix Flow as well. The app's only a little over a year old at this, a little over a year old at this point, as far as from when we've been able to actually work with it, even internally. But those are the kinds of updates and questions that, we want to always pass on to the engineering team and let them know. So, Cliff, hi Cliff. My S1R2 is in for service. The techs and I were debating if the Lumix dummy battery negatively changes thermal performance expectations. No, it doesn't. I saw your posts about it. The results you were getting out of your camera were way, way out of spec. So, if you send it to our tech team, I'll link up with them and kind of see, what's going on with the camera. But the fact that, and this isn't, please don't take this as calling you out, the fact that you're the only one that I've seen that's had that particular issue, where you're actually getting worse performance on the firmware, tells me that potentially there might be something up with the camera. So let me talk with the tech team and see what's going on. But it would likely need to be, although I just reread your comment, is in for service. So likely, they need to see the camera to see if there's anything, just there. Lord Lococo Cano. Nice. By testing S1R2 with Area 51 10 gigabit speed, S1R2 crashes. Can firmware fix it? Works well with the A7R5. So, I don't know if I had commented with you on either Discord or over on Reddit, but I looked up those cables. Two things. One, those cables are really expensive for what it looks like they offer. I'm not going to bash a company for trying to get their bag, but those are very expensive cables for what they're offering you. Two, depending on what cable it is you have, if they have some sort of microcontroller that's for signal boosting or anything like that, that could be changing and altering what the communication pipeline is. Lumix products and Panasonic products stick very strictly to what a specifications requirements are. So if a cable manufacturer or whatever other camera companies want to do, it's up to them. If they want to stick to, hey, the spec says this is what it needs to read out at, it's on those companies to either follow the specifications or not. Now, I don't know if that is necessarily the case you're seeing here, but it wouldn't be something that's firmware on our side. It would be on the cable manufacturer's side for compatibility. If they know that they're doing something that is potentially not within USB communication specifications, or there's something going on. I had this problem with a Tether Tools cable years ago that was an active cable. It would detect sometimes it wouldn't detect. It would all depend on how I plugged the cable in. That's up to the cable manufacturer. That's not up to the camera. I hate to tell you. So it's not going to be something that we would fix. It's something that you'd have to check with the cable manufacturer. If there's a known problem on their side that, hey, our cables don't work with this camera brand, that tells you that they're doing something different with the cable. It's the same with memory cards. Certain memory cards we still do not recommend for our cameras because they're optimizing their cards for some other purpose or some other reason or some other spec that is falling outside of what the stated specifications for media is. Let's see here. Please let us choose aspect ratio for frame markers. You have those choices. It's all in the camera's menu. Cinelike A2 for S5 Mark IIX. When is that coming? Probably never. We've never promised it. We've never said it was coming. It was never an expectation that it was coming. It is an S1 Mark II series or a GH7 series capability. How does the updates heat and fan settings for the extended recording times affect battery life, if at all? I haven't done any battery specific tests. Like kind of see rundown times. From what I'm seeing and from what I've been told, there's not really anything that you have to worry about as far as that goes. If there were power consumption changes, I think we would have listed them. If they're of any meaningful difference. I'll tell you on single batteries, I'm getting anywhere between an hour and a half, like hour 15 to an hour and a half, depending on the recording mode, just off the top of my head. Yeah, so that's kind of where those are. Thanks for not breaking your cameras with the update. Yep, we have a good history with these things. Where do we go? Okay, so I do want to come back in here and talk about some of the other stuff that was added. So, as mentioned, I'm going to remove this for now, and we'll figure out if we want to do chat box again later at some point. Anyway, some of the other stuff that we added in this update was the ability to change what the autofocus system looks like. So we know that a lot of you have always asked and stated, you want us to change or update our UI with this stuff, and this camera adds it. So for one, AF Detect multi-frame display. If you don't like seeing all of the boxes of all the subjects that it could possibly detect, come into here, turn this to off. If you don't like our crosshairs for face and eye detect, you can come in and change that here. So I've got a book here to show really quickly. So I'm going to put this over the face. Well, let me do it this way, actually. We're going to come in. Hope if I select the right one. We're going to come in. We're going to go to full area. So as you can see, this is our normal face and eye detect. This is what we've had for years. Cool. It's crosshairs. It's a box over the head. Crosshairs change depending on, which eye is going to be in focus. If you are one of those people that does not like this, I can go into the menus. I can go to Human Eye Detect Display. Eye Detect Style. I can change it to a box. And then I can also come in here and I can change crosshairs, whether or not I want to use the crosshairs while focusing. And now I get just the box over the eye. So it is completely up to you now how you want to use the system. I know that a lot have asked for that in our cameras before, so we've got it in the camera. You have that ability to change it. If I want to change eyes, if it detects the other eye, you've got the ability to use the joystick when you're in full area to toggle between the two eyes if you want. So yeah, this was again an update provided specifically because of all of you. You asked for it. You gave us the use cases. Enough of you commented that it gave enough energy for us to be able to say, hey, this is something that a lot of people have been wanting to get. So we got it in there. For S1II, can we get a 5.1K open gate? No. The S1II is what has that capability. Is there a multi-button press code sequence that will completely factory restore an S1R Mark II? No, you do it through software, Cliff. Any service mode accessed outside of a service team is a very bad thing to do. If you do it, remember, we can tell if you've been in that menu, and likely it could likely void your warranty, because there are very specific settings that need to be saved in those modes for various different things, so do not go into those modes. In fact, yeah, it's just bad news. But that's why the menu gives you the full factory reset. It does a full factory restore. The only thing it doesn't change is date and time and your time zone. Is the AF in the G9 Mark II the same for all LUMIX PDAF cameras? And on the S9, if live streaming only are the temp limitations, since it's not recording, it should staying running if HDMI is used. Foresight. So the AF system in the G9 Mark II is pretty much the same as all the other LUMIX PDAF cameras. It's just it runs on a Micro Four Thirds sensor. So you have some of the sensor characteristics that aid in the way the systems work. So you'll see subtle differences between the cameras. For the most part, our systems are pretty well level set with each other now. Caveat being, we did just do the update for the S1II series, which refined even further. I don't know if those updates would make it to the previous generation cameras. It kind of depends on what is needed with the newer processors, the newer hardware. And as far as the S9 goes for live streaming, you do still have temperature limitations that you have to keep in mind. Whenever you are going to be sending an HDMI signal out, you are adding in extra processing to the camera, so it's not just sitting idly by. We do a clean, full HDMI out on the camera. So that means that being able to take the signal, if I've got the camera set in 4K, but my HDMI switch or whatever only recognizes 1080, the camera has to downsample that to 1080 to send it out. That's always done on the camera. That's not done on the switch side or the capture card side. So you got to kind of keep some of those things in mind. Usually, if you can set the camera closer to what the input resolution is for the device that you're working on, the less you're asking the camera to do. So, yeah. But keep the camera cool. I've done relatively long streams with the S9. It's not a camera I would do really long live streams with. Like, general shooting would be fine. Like, my office right now, I actually have my office running a lot hotter than normal today. It's like almost 80 degrees in my office today. I wouldn't use the S9 for that. I would keep using my S1II, which is the main camera we've been using, or I'd comfortably use an S1R2 or an S1II for those particular options. An S9, probably not for that particular case. Let's see here. David, given a lack of point-and-shoot premium products, do you think, not do you know, but do you think we will see a successor to the FZ2500? Honestly, no idea. It doesn't matter as to whether or not I know or I think or anything like that. It's not a topic I discuss. Other than I will say there is definitely, we see that there's a desire for, premium point and shoot style products. Just don't know if that would ever translate into anything. So, I love your name, YouTube. Hey Sean, are the sensor read/reset times improved on the S1R2? No, this update doesn't change anything about read times, like sensor read times. Those are usually hardware based. You're not really able to change any of that stuff. For those that don't know, it's like rolling shutter, stuff like that. MP4 Lite with 60p, this and AF subdetect in 5.1K 60p external monitor, and that's it. Oh, so I did want to talk about that. 5.1K 60p with subject detection and external monitor. Thing to remember with anything over 4K is that you are having to downsample the signal a lot more. Our cameras can output 3840 by 2160 over HDMI. When you do that, if I'm in C4K, it's still going to send out 3840 by 2160, but you're going to get C4K I think does actually send out 4096 because it's on the HDMI spec. If I'm shooting open gate, if I'm doing 6K, 5.1K, if I'm doing 7.2K, if I'm doing 8K, any of the other higher resolutions than C4K, the camera has to downsample those resolutions into C4K or UHD. So to start with, you are now taking the higher resolution recording, the faster frame rate, and subject detection internally in the camera. You would then also have to add in real-time downsampling into 4K that actually takes the 5.1K and compresses it into a 3840 by 2160 output, it's a ton of processing power. At some point, something has to give. And from what my understanding is, over 4K or over C4K, even with the 120 frames per second, because we were able to get that, enough tweaked into the camera, higher resolutions just immensely increase the amount of processing that has to be done. I have seen the comments about, well, what if you give us an option to turn something else off or remove this or remove that? It's easy to say. None of us are engineers. We don't know how hard that actually would be. In a lot of cases, you may also find that may cause more problems to be able to try to do stuff like that with these. Remember, these are not CPUs like you find in your computer or on a phone. No camera runs them like that. These are very bespoke processors for image capture and image processing. So, all right, let's talk another quick feature here. I do have to end this stream right at the top of the hour because I do have to be over on Discord, which if you are not part of Discord already, go check us out on Discord. Links in the description. I do office hours over there first Thursday of every month, where you get a little bit smaller group, can be chatting directly with me, and I can demo other things that, we might not demo over here. So encourage you to follow me over there after this. It starts at quarter past the hour. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about was some of the changes in the photography modes with the cameras. So again, I have the S1II hooked up right here. We've added a couple different things. You'll see a new icon on the top left of the screen that's got a kind of aperture with a C and then a cross through on it. If you ever happen to be with constant preview on or off, when you flip it off on the new firmware in the S1IIs, you'll get an icon to remind you that constant preview is turned off. If you happen to be someone that jumps back and forth in those different looks. There is also some changes for the burst rates. So if we go into the burst shots, the S1R Mark II now has the ability to shoot at 20 frames per second in electronic with a 20 frames per second pre-burst. The cool part about this on the S1R2 is that you have the ability, when you go into the H or the H plus mode, this is where you change the image priority or speed priority if you want the 14-bit or 12-bit. You don't have to change anything of that stuff on these particular modes. So you've got 40 frames per second, which is how the camera launched. You now have a 20 frames per second option, and you have a 20 frames per second pre-burst option. And as a reminder, we do up to a 1.5 second, despite what a bunch of websites online that are comparing products that apparently didn't read a spec sheet got wrong for the longest time. We do 1.5 seconds. If you read one of those sites and they say we only do 1 second, maybe help us out and correct them, because I've tried to. But we do up to 1 second, or down to 0.5 second in this. So that's on the S1R2. You have that. In a second, I'll plug in the S1 Mark II, and we can go through that part of it. The other big change, I haven't seen many people actually talk about this one before. If you're someone who jumps back and forth with ISO values and you want to be able to quickly access like auto ISO, as of right now, we know if I want to go to auto ISO, I got to cycle through all of my ISOs. So if I've got my camera set to say, I'm at 8000 ISO, if I need to be able to jump to auto in the current firmware, I have to open my ISO and scroll all the way back to auto to get there. We've made a change. I can now go in and I can program a function button to override this. So right now I just press the front FN button and I can jump into auto ISO. So now if I'm in here and say I have my ISO up to 16,000 ISO and a scenario comes up and I really need the camera to be in auto because it's kind of unpredictable, I can just push that button. It jumps me directly to auto ISO. I press it again, and it returns me back to the ISO I had set. This was another one of those things that users, people who actually work with our cameras, have asked us for a lot. Just a little bit of a faster way, a little bit better quality of life, a little better kind of efficiency in how you use the camera, we've added that in with this camera. So it's a single button operation, or you also have the ability that if I go into my setups, my custom menu, and actually, is it custom menu? I think it's custom menu. I always forget where it is. If I go to, or no, it is in the main camera menu. It shows you how often I ever change this setting. I maybe change it once and then never again. So we go here. Looking for is my ISO. Yeah, there it is. So if I go to my ISO displayed settings, so it's under the setup menu, operations page 1, go to ISO displayed settings, front and rear dial control. I now also have an auto ISO option here. So if I prefer, I can have my front dial toggle that for auto ISO, or like how I have it, I have the front dial toggled to control when I'm in auto ISO what my maximum range would be. Double check here. If I'm in video mode and we are going to be, let's say I'm going to put this camera into Arilog C3 and I want to be able to change my ISOs, we've made it a lot easier to tell what your ISO values are. So right now, you'll have a blue line that underlines what the low ISO range is, and a red line that identifies what your high range is. So this is another visual cue to be able to say, hey, in Arilog C3 on an S1R2, I know my second native ISO is 800. Right now I'm at 640. I should really jump this up to 800 to get those cleaner shadows and change that circuit over. But we've also adjusted if you're someone who uses the dial in the back. So if I go to dial set in the menu and I go to control dial, this is the circular dial around the menu set button. I can now have this control my ISO. And if you watch those numbers, they're yellow when you're just selecting regular numbers. But when I hit ISO, you see that the color changes. So in that case, it's 160. If I go up a little bit higher to 800, it changes color. So this lets me go in and change those ISO values and be able to just get a better quick view of, where my native ISO values are, especially in a camera like the S1II or even the S1R2, where you've got different ranges that you can work on. So like if I come in and I turn DR expansion on and I go in and I adjust my ISO, you see that those values change for DR expansion. So we've moved up from 800 to 1600 now, where my second range changes. And you can see it on the screen too. You can see noisier, change up to 16, it's much cleaner. So we've made it a lot easier to kind of identify the different ISO values. Now this does work in the video range. It does not work in the photography range because in photography, your ISOs are always 100 or 640. That's it. It's also not really that big of an impact in the photography side because, 400 ISO versus 640, there's so little noise gain from 400 to 640 that you're not really seeing much of a difference. I know someone who Pixel Peeps is going to come out here and, go nuts on me for saying it. You really can't see a difference. You can't. In the real world, you can't. But yeah, in the end, it's just that's why it's not in the photography side. It's in the video side because they change so much based on the different ISO values, based on different log profiles. In the photography side, unless you put the camera in a video recording mode, or color profile, which is not advised anyway, that's why it's not really going to be in the photo side. But we can pass that information on to the engineers and say, hey, we've gotten a couple of requests. It's just, in general, photographers weren't the ones asking for that stuff. So, let's see here. I got time for like one or two more questions, and then if you still have questions and stuff like that, jump over to the Discord after this. And like I said, at quarter after the hour, we'll be kicking off the my office hours over there. So you'll be able to continue those questions just over on Discord instead. Brendan, my S1R2 showed overheating warnings before pressing record. 24 FPS, 6.4K open gate, Kondor Blue dummy battery, CF Express card, and SD card were in the body. Was going to remove the CF to record. I would also question the Kondor Blue dummy battery. Check the CF Express card, see if it is something that's on our validated list. Make sure you're on the current firmware. Try it with a standard battery, because my tests, I've done 85 degree plus direct sun in 8.1K and 6.4 and 7.2K in all the different modes on my S1R2, and even plugged in USB-C power into the camera and let it run and charge the battery internally, and I don't have those problems. So definitely check a couple of those things. Try it without the dummy battery. It's no shade on Kondor at all. I like their products, but it's not something we make, so we don't know what they're doing as far as power delivery to the camera. CF Express cards can cause heat even when you're not recording because they have to be powered. It depends on what the power the card is requesting from the camera. If it's always trying to push the maximum amount of power, it's just like an SSD. You put an SSD in an enclosure on a computer, it doesn't matter if you're writing to it, they're still going to get hot. Is there a reason there are not more 1440p recording options? It would be nice to have something like 2K 1440p option in the S1II. Mainly because 1440p is not a typical recorded format. It is a display format, like YouTube and all those other platforms. You can deliver in 1440p. Video games, graphics, things like that are 1440p. It's not a common frame rate or resolution that's recorded in cameras in general. So there's very little request and very little need for it when most processing software and tools are usually either around 1080p or 4K for those jumps. Yeah. Does using the USB-C port on any LUMIX camera allow the camera to be functional while charging the battery? I need to shut off my GH7 to allow battery charging. Foresight, double check what the AC adapter is that you're using. GH7 and other cameras that can charge and operate require 9-volt 3 amps specifically from the adapter. If the adapter doesn't have that specific output for USB-C, it won't work. Yeah. All right, yeah, I still got time for one more. What color depth is... Oh, this is from Cam. What color depth is the S1 Mark II using an open gate? Because it doesn't look like 420. Curious if the sensor is being pushed extra. Well, Cam, it is 420. The output that you get from the camera is 420. It is a 10-bit. Cameras, in some cases, generate that 420 10-bit from much higher quality image itself that wouldn't necessarily be able to be rendered in the camera. So, yeah, we just have much better, I think, control over the ability to create a solid 420 10-bit HEVC file than most can. So, all right, we got one more question in here, and then we'll have to jump out and head over to Discord. Why do we have only 15 photos in the stack mode when Canon offers unlimited? Well, Canon can do whatever they want to do. It's fine with them. We've got 15 because that's what our engineers put in there. They have reasonings behind it. I've never asked them for it. I can ask them. If you need more, cool. There are options out there that may have it for you. Our system, this is the first camera we've added that returned photo stacking in the camera. Yeah, so considering the last update was insane and basically pushed the cameras into top tier hybrid territory, Linkin Park on the brain, hybrid theory. What can we expect going forward? How can these cameras be improved? Maybe tracking AF. Well, even in this update, there are improvements for things like enhanced tracking AF stability through algorithms. So we've also improved some of the algorithms there. One thing I do want to bring up, because I haven't seen this mentioned anywhere else, and Cam, I'm actually surprised. I haven't seen you talk about it, but I know that you've got some other anamorphic stuff out there. To be fair, it's also been the holidays, and I haven't been watching as much content as I normally do. So, in the update, we made some changes for the anamorphic lovers out there. So, anamorphic D-squeeze display. We know that we've had, 1.5, 1.33, 2.0. After this update, we've added 1.6. So you have a 1.6x D-squeeze. And the stabilization system also has the 1.6 for anamorphic D-squeeze as support. So anyone's got any of like the 1.6 anamorphic lenses, you've now got a proper 1.6 versus the 1.5 kind of way that the system had been running. So that was a new addition into the camera as well. False color on the G9 Mark II, probably never going to happen. That's a video specific feature on for our cameras. Will auto ISO I assume you mean the changes to auto ISO be added to the S1II? I don't know. I tend to lean to not thinking so. At some point, the S1II, the S1II may not be getting as many of the updates on the newer cameras because we also don't know how much processing, editing, and all that kind of stuff is needed. Linkin Park accidental reference. Yeah. Well, they were awesome when they came through Austin back in April, so I will say that. All right, y'all. I have to wrap up here today, at least on the YouTubes, because we are going to be moving this over to Discord. So join us over there. It's going to start at about 2:15 Central Time, so 3:15 East Coast. Basically, in 13 minutes, we're going to start over there. We will be back next Thursday, 2 p.m. So regular scheduled time. Join us during that time. If you've got questions, if I didn't get to a question that you want or you didn't want to ask it in the live chat, drop it in the comment section underneath the video because I can reference it, come up with some more info if you need. If I need to find more details for you, we can do that and we can discuss on next week's live stream. Yeah, so other than that, again, as a reminder, make sure to double check your firmware. We did release a minor little update that corrected an error with the MP4 Lite recording for some users. So be sure to get your cameras updated there. And yeah, for those of you that want to join us over in Discord, links down in the description. If you like the video, hit like. If you like this content and you think we deserve it, give us a subscribe. Share it to people that you think may really enjoy these kinds of conversations or this access into a brand. Yeah, we'll talk to you later. Bye.